All right, guys. Well, hopefully everybody can hear me okay and can see Drew Bremer on the screen on the right. You can, as always, I think we've done enough of these now that hopefully everybody knows how they work. That if you click the presentation on the right-hand side, you should be able to follow along with some notes and some pictures of Drew. He might just flash up on your screen when he's talking anyway. And if not, you can click on him and see him as well. As we're going to go through some questions like we normally do and go from there. So if you guys do have any other questions that you want to ask as we go through the conversation, or you want to add to what we're doing, feel free to type along in the chat box if you want. I know some of you have already submitted questions in the form ahead of time. So so our special guest today is Drew Bremer, who I want to just introduce quick, and then Drew, hopefully you can give us a little quick introduction too. Drew is from East Grand Rapids initially, is a full-time member of the U.S. Paralympic national team right now, and he's very kindly jumped on to talk to us today and hopefully share some of his stories about his pathway in the game, maybe some lessons learned in the game, and as always, give a little bit of advice, and I'm sure some stories that as key members in the soccer world, which we have about 76 of them on the call here, you can hopefully take some good lessons and some great things from Drew's story. So Drew, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you coming on at short notice and spending a little bit of time with us today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all for having me. Excited to talk.
Yeah. So you want to just go quick and just give us a kind of a brief intro. You see on there, we'll kind of go along with the notes, but we're going to dive into your youth and your college journey and your national team journey in a little bit. But as a brief intro, why don't you just tell us kind of where you're from and where you're playing right now?
For sure. Yep. So I was born and raised in East Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm sure many of you know where that is. Just about 15 minutes or east of Grand Rapids, obviously. Grew up playing for Garasso, which then turned into the GR Crew, then turned into Midwest United. So my childhood was a lot like many of you, starting out and playing throughout the club system and everything. And now I'm fortunate enough to be down in Atlanta, representing the USA and full-time contract with a Paralympic team. I've been down here since about mid-October and living the life of a professional soccer player now. It's pretty crazy.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, well, again, thanks for coming. So we're going to just kind of get through some of these topics here, Drew, and like we've been on kind of a similar path. I think I told you before, we've talked with a couple of college coaches, a couple of different pro players and college players to just get I think the real interesting piece is some light on your journey and where you've been and what you've learned throughout the ups and downs of your career so far, and give us a little bit of insight to your story as a club alum and all those things. So we'll start off. I know you kind of touched on it and said you just finished training, but what are you doing right now as far as isolation? Obviously our players are all locked in the house and we've got them on home training plans and they're doing what they can. What are you doing down there with the national team, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, for sure. We were, before this all started, we were training about 3 hours a day down at the Atlanta United Training Center and then in the gym as well, doing weightlifting. But that ended about a month ago. So now, we were relegated to our homes and our driveways and our front yards. And luckily enough, I live with two of my teammates. We rented a house down here. And then another teammate lives just a couple streets down. So he comes over and we have four of us for a training session at our driveway. Just got off of it. We started out, just doing passing drills, getting into turns, doing some rondos as much as we possibly can. We're doing 3v1 rondos on concrete, which is, it'll test your skills a little bit for sure. And then, we have in-home workouts, I'm sure many of you are also doing, just the normal body weight lifts, the squats. We got some bands, but yeah, it's definitely making do with what we can do. So
yeah, so you're trying to incorporate the ball as much as you can then, and your groups of 3 and 4 doing some skill stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been doing, I'm sure many of you are also doing the dribbling drills with the Cruyffs, and you really got to think, and it's basic stuff, but it's still very important at every single level. So you're working on those, working on receiving a ball and doing different turns and playing to a guy behind you and opening it up correctly, and being wide and turning playing to the back foot, opening up and turning, stuff like that. And then obviously just rondos, and then we also built a soccer tennis court on our driveway, so we finish off with that and have some fun and get into competition that way. So
Get a little bit competitive around the house then, huh?
Yeah. You
Nice.
don't want to lose. You'll be mad for a day or two.
Yeah. How is what's the balance of what your national team coaches are giving you versus you're just taking initiative on your own as well? Is it a bit of both, or what's that look like?
For sure. Yeah, we also first of all, I should say we're also doing tactical meetings about 2 hours or for about 4 hours a week with our coach. So he gives us information assignments. It almost feels like homework in a way, but it's good homework. It's about soccer, breaking down video and screenshotting certain areas in the game. And, he gives us 4 options and asks which option we would take and why. But then he's also giving us the on-field stuff and, the drills, bang off a wall, go 8 yards one way, do a Cruyff turn, come back. But it is also us just putting it together and thinking, all right, well, that's getting a little bit monotonous. We'll let them know, but we're also kind of, throughout our years, we've all learned a lot of drills that we can implement and know the importance of. So it's also definitely a little bit of both, but a lot of input as well from the coach.
Yeah, are you finding ways to like use it to work on certain things in your game, like weak foot or any technical skills that maybe you don't have time regularly to work on?
For sure. I on Fridays I like to get out about an hour early just by myself. I really just hit it against the wall and work on my weak foot and do all the turns we've been doing, but just use my weak foot. That way it's obviously you never want to be a little bit embarrassed when you're doing a weak foot with other people around you, but when you're working by yourself, you can just really focus on and do what you want to do and really just try and improve without really any judgment and work on it as hard as you can and hopefully get better for when you're with teammates and obviously into games. Your weak foot's better and whatnot. So, and obviously different things you usually are not great at. So, different turns that you use often, stuff like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, to move on then, I guess we'll start, which we do have players. So, we got some players on the call that are probably ranging from 11, 12 through to 19, some seniors that are going on to college. So I always like to kind of start and get a little bit of your story, like where you started, if you can remember back to the good old days, and how you got into the game, how you found yourself in club soccer, school soccer, what that looked like for you as a kid.
For sure, yeah. As I just mentioned before, too, I had 2 older siblings, an older sister and an older brother. And we were always, from the moment I could walk, basically, we were active in our front yard and everything. So, I got into rec soccer, kindergarten, before I could even play club. Because, nowadays, I think they started U7 or even younger, possibly. But back in those days, it was a strict U9 start. So you had to play a couple of years of rec soccer just with your friends before you realized you're good enough to maybe play club soccer. And then when I turned 7, my brother, who was a couple of years older than me, had already played a year for Grassa. And, it seemed really fun and cool, and you were playing a lot more competitive. And they had really cool Nike jerseys as well that I really wanted when I was 7 years old. So I begged my dad to let me try out a year early, and luckily I made the team. Unfortunately, they changed out of the cool Nike jerseys, but at that point it didn't matter too much because I was on the team and was able to play. So.
Hey, you're back in the cool Nike jersey right now, though, right? So that makes up for those lost Adidas years, doesn't it?
Yeah, I got good enough Nike gear now. Yeah.
Very cool. So then you stayed, and I know you were in the Grassa days and some of those. And I know when I first met you, you were with the Grand Rapids crew in your high school ages, and you played with your high school team. Any key things that you remember from those ages where like was really important to you in maybe getting your love for the game or building maybe a little bit of character as to who you became in the later parts of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started with Crew, I got a new coach. His name was Curly, or Adnan Grozdanek was his name. And he really turned me on to the whole chess of soccer. He was really about keeping possession, playing a good style of soccer, and thinking about the game. And I've grown and continued to use that. And I really like to think about the game. I'm very much a tactical player. And when I look and I examine all parts of the game and immerse myself in that, and I love the tactical videos. And all right, why did this player do that? And why is he doing that? Even when I'm just watching an EPL game or whatnot. And that's something I've really grown up to it's a huge part of my game. I often, people say, oh, you're always first to step to a ball here or there. You're really athletic, but honestly, it's just a lot of it's just reading the game and knowing what's going to happen, hopefully. And that's something for sure I very much benefited from my U14, I had him all the way through U17, and we tried to play a good brand of soccer. We weren't maybe the most elite club team ever, but we definitely learned the correct way to play the game of soccer. So, and thinking about the game.
Yeah. When did you did you watch the game a lot as a kid, or did that come later for you? Were you always like a diehard fan, or I know you said you played a few different sports. Were you a diehard fan, or did that come when you hit college?
You know, it didn't really start until probably I was 13, 14, simply because there wasn't the NBCSN coverage of the EPL like there is nowadays. It was kind of the Monday game on ESPN maybe, and I was usually off playing soccer and stuff myself, so I wasn't fully into it. But once the coverage started when I was 13, 14, I was huge into it. And I was always watching I was obviously watching and enjoying, but I was also watching players, you know, their tactical movements, what they're doing, trying to pick up and trying to learn from them. And that's something that's helped me out so much.
Quality. Yeah. Well, let's get to the thick of your story and kind of where you've been, because I know I got a little bit of a sneak preview to it, and I've kind of got in touch with you the last few days and heard about that. And I'm sure some people kind of read a little bit of the article that went out about your career so far. But let's get to that, because I think that's really the fascinating piece, as you navigated through club soccer and then came the first step, which was kind of college soccer for you. Talk to me, like, I know you said your club team maybe wasn't the highest profile, so you may have gone a little bit under the radar in some recruiting things I know you mentioned to me.
Yeah.
But how did that happen? How did you end up at K College, and what did that process look like for you?
For sure, yeah. So as you said, I wasn't very highly recruited at all. You know, I was definitely a late bloomer in soccer once I got to Kalamazoo. But, you know, so I went to Kalamazoo. You know, I was a 3-year starter on varsity for Eastern Rapids, you know, and everything. So I wasn't a bad soccer player by any means, but I wasn't quite a top recruit by any means. But so I went to Kalamazoo, you know, focus on academics really, knowing that I loved soccer still, and I watched the team and stay up to date, and I knew a lot of the guys on the team. But interestingly enough, it really started when I found out about the national team. And once I found out about the national team, that was the summer before my junior year. I kind of reached out to Lumumba Shabazz again, who's the coach of the Kalamazoo men's team. And I was like, hey, you know what? I have an opportunity maybe to go on the Paralympic national team this fall. Is there any way I can just be around the team or try out and see where it goes? And that was probably in June, with Trouts in August and the season starting up. And so I worked really hard that summer. And I came into August, you know, it was very difficult because I hadn't been in competitive soccer in about 2 years. But you know, I worked, and it was such an adjustment too, because the pace of the game, just the tenacity, the intensity. Everyone at Kalamazoo is a winner. You know, they're all so competitive. But was lucky enough to make the team, and then I was training with them all the time, and just really upping my game and learning from everyone. You really got to learn when you step up to the college game, because there's so many good players. You know, club players that went on when they were seniors, turned freshmen, and have been there for 3 years and were good seniors now. So learning from them, learning as much as possible. So I really had to transition quick back into competitive soccer.
Yeah, for sure, man. So in a nutshell, you kind of went to Kalamazoo. What were you studying at Kalamazoo? Business? Economics. Because we call that's the smart person school where we come from. So you must have been pretty good in the classroom and chose to do that. And I know it's a very, very highly thought of academic institution, isn't it, down there? And I know Shabazz pretty well too from a soccer side, and I know he's a very good coach that runs a good program too. So kind of the perfect world there, I guess, for you, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I chose it because of the academics, but I could not have fallen into a better situation with athletics either, because, you know, once I told him about the situation, he was so open to it. And, you know, once he told me I'd have to work hard, but I did, and he was such a good mentor and coach, and learned so much from him just in the short couple months getting back to competitive soccer, and it was so welcoming. Appreciate that so much from him. So a really great situation. I found
great guy too that you get to play for there. I know he's a great guy to work with. Why don't we inject there before we get on to the Paralympic journey? Talk to me a little bit about dealing with CP and how that was as a kid and through college. The effect I read or I saw in one of your videos with the US team, you talking about being so one-footed, and it made you like so dominant with one foot, which ended up being a strength for you. Yeah, just talk to me a little bit about like how that was as a kid, what effect that really had on you as a player in training, and maybe how you used it, some advantages like that in development.
For sure. So just to start off, I have hemiplegic cerebral palsy. So basically, down my right side, my right arm, my right leg are pretty weak muscle wise. In soccer terms, if it's on my right side, I might get pushed off the ball a little bit easier just because I'm muscle. And then down my ankle, my foot, I can't even make the laces motion with my right foot. So it's all inside passing and whatnot. But growing up, soccer was so great because I could have been, labeled kind of by my disability, but instead I was the guy who played soccer. I was a soccer player, and really not many people even noticed too much about my disability. So, and then in my soccer game, I really just thought of it as a physical disability, like a disability like any other. Some people are shorter, some people are slower. So I had to adapt my game, knowing that I had this disadvantage, and I had just to cope with it. So, I worked on my left foot a lot. Different ways to cut in my left foot, and people knew I was going that way, but still get onto my left foot. Just make adjustments just like anyone else would with whether it's shorter or faster. So that was, I had to work on my left foot all the time, worked on my right foot as much as I possibly could, be able to play the necessary passes. And then again, the strength I knew I could control was the non-physical aspect of the game, reading the game, understanding the game, the tactics, and then doing as much technical work as I can with my left foot and my right foot. So, yeah.
That's class. It's class story. I mean, I think so. So you think, as far as you've mentioned it as a disadvantage you had in developing, maybe comparing yourself. Did you think about that a lot? Like when you were competing with your teammates, or you were trying to make a team, or on a Saturday when you were playing, would you think of that as a disadvantage and really try to sharpen your tools in other areas? Was that something that like you thought on every day, or was it something that you just got past and didn't think about?
I kind of I accepted it and then got past it. Just like, all right, I have to deal with it. So let's just get on and make the rest of my game as good as it can possibly be. And I did face challenges, growing up, and at every step of the way, every year as kids got older and more physical, I was, kind of worried, and I had to just keep working and working and working because, and all the way up through college, because college is such a physical game. You got to find ways to continue to improve the other areas of the game where you can be as strong as you possibly can, when you have this disadvantage. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, and I think that's such a great message in it for players, and I'm sure one that you can look back on now and think I'm sure in some way has had a really positive effect on who you are as far as competing right now at the national level, like getting over things and trying to keep things in perspective and focusing on what you are good at, which for you, simple like that, is like you mentioned, your left foot, or maybe your soccer brain and other areas, I think is such a great message.
For sure, yeah. And then with the national team, there's so many, obviously the guys, all the other guys have disadvantages too. So it's watching them cope with it and seeing how they do it. It's still incredible for me watching other people. And I mean, some guys deal with crazy stuff. Our goalies go, they have brain injuries, so sometimes they lose their vision for a little bit. Just not ideal for a goalie, but they're dealing with it. It's nuts. So it's been such a crazy story. Yeah.
How it is at that level, and I guess we'll get to it in a minute, but are you kind of on your own there to deal with it and find your ways? I mean, obviously you're all like very much elite performers, so I'm sure like the goalkeeper example, which is out there, the goalkeeper just learns, or is the coaching and help to deal with that side of things too?
Yeah, the coach, obviously, we get coached to play into our strengths just like anything. So if we know all of the people, like what's their good foot and bad foot, obviously, it's even, obviously you want to do that in normal soccer, but it's even just more amplified for our team. You got to play a guy on his right foot if his left foot's, not good. You got to know maybe this guy can't make such a quick motion to a ball or something like that. And just, you got to deal with it. So we all accept each other's disabilities and just play with it, and just it makes us a better team. So we know each other so well that we're able. So
you are trying to exploit those weaknesses in games, and you'll know that of people, right?
Yeah, and then all of our scouting reports for the Paralympic team, we know the opponent's weak and strong foot, and the goalies, if they have bad hand, which side is their bad hand? You want to shoot on that side more, stuff like that. The scouting reports are
yeah, very crazy. All right, well, to go back, so you finished your college career, kind of in a nutshell. You went there for 2 years and then played 2 years. you shared. I mean, I know that level, and that conference especially, and it is a very good conference and a very physical one. So was that just a big step up for you from high school and club soccer to deal with the physicality and the pace of the game there?
For sure. Yeah, it was such a step up. I remember the very first training session that I came in that summer, and we were doing the 4v2 rondos, and I played a hospital ball once, and then had a bad touch once, and I was just getting barked at with the intensity, and I knew right away I had to clean it up because all these guys wanted to win, and they're so competitive. And then when you get into 11-a-side game, the physicality, the aerial challenge is so much different. You really gotta bunker down and just grind it out sometimes. So
yeah,
it's certainly just another level.
So fantastic accomplishment to get there. So then why don't you give us a little intro to how the national program came about? I know you gave me a little bit of a short version yesterday. Like how did you become familiar with it? How did that, how did it come?
It's so crazy. Again, I was out of soccer for 2 years. I thought my soccer career was over. This web call would be a lot shorter if that was the case. But I was on my way home from a round of golf with my brother, and the Paralympic team had just qualified through the World Cup for the Paralympics, which is in 2016. This was in 2015. So they qualified for the Rio Paralympics the next summer. And the Women's World Cup was going on, and I was following the women's team on Twitter, and they sent a congratulatory video out to the Paralympic team and tagged them in it, saying, "Hey, congrats on qualifying for Rio. We'll see you there," because obviously they're the Olympics and they would be there too. And then I just I clicked on the team tag because I was a fan of soccer. And I was like, "Oh, I wonder what this U.S. soccer team is about." And I read in the headline it's for players with TBI, stroke, or cerebral palsy. And I was like, wait, what is this thing? I've never heard of this before. And I was kind of under the assumption, like a lot of people, that Paralympics was kind of a wheelchair sport and everything. I never understood that I maybe could qualify for the Paralympics. But the coach's email or the team's email was right in the profile as well. So I just emailed him like, hey, I played a couple years of varsity soccer. I think I'm a pretty decent soccer player. I'd love to learn more about the team. And then the next week, the coach called me and we discussed my career, my soccer experience and whatnot. And then I got the first invite out to a camp, which was at the StubHub Center out at the LA Galaxy Stadium in the middle of October 2015.
Wow. So how did you, it's amazing to me that you'd never heard of it. Was the Paralympic team a pretty new thing at that time then? Or like, did it just not come across to you? You said you didn't think that you qualified. Did you just think that you weren't eligible for that and it wasn't something that was an option for you at that point, or what?
Yeah, it had been around for a while. I think the first Paralympic Games with CP soccer in it was 1984. So it was around for over 30 years. But the challenge is, not many people play CP or with CP play soccer at competitive level. So the recruiting is just so hard to get guys in the team, and so you got to reach out to social media and whatnot. And it's just, since I've come about the last 5 years, the branding's been just get so much more and so much more, and U.S. Soccer is really investing in us. But yeah, back then it was, it was literally just through social media and emails and our coach reaching out to club teams and trying to know if there's anyone with some idea of a symptom that could maybe qualify for the team. So yeah, it's crazy the recruiting.
Wow.
It's not quite like normal soccer. You have so many different pathways. It's just kind of hopefully we find them.
So you went into LA then for your camp. I mean, that's got to be a pretty surreal experience, right? And I know in speaking to other players that have gone to national teams, just the first time you get that national team jersey and seeing how the national team do things is just a complete different world, right? Compared to where you've been so far and the fields and the resources and the coaches and everything. Was that just a special feeling to train there?
Oh man, it was awesome. I was so excited to go, and on the plane ride, I was like, all right, I'm actually going. This is real. And I got there and met the guys, and I was like, all right, this is sweet. Getting to know the guy's story and whatnot. And then you get into the locker room and you get the gear, and you're like, all right, well, this is even more of a cool feeling. And then you get on the field, and you realize, you want to progress with this team. You want to, after a couple hours of knowing the guys, but there was already 14, which is the roster size from last year that they qualified for the Paralympics with. So they're not bad players by any stretch of the imagination. So you're really thrown right into the competitiveness. You're surreal. When you get on that field, you're like, all right, now I need to work and show these guys that I can play as well. So it's a flip of a switch like that, and you just got to go and prove yourself.
Yeah, I guess sounds like goes from surreal to real quick, huh?
Yeah, it
And
really
then
was.
so then what year was that then? Was that 14 or 15? Because
Yeah,
then you had
so
the Paralympics was 2016, right?
yeah, yeah. So my first camp was October 2015, and then the
Okay.
Paralympics were 2016 in August. So
So when did you find out that you were going to that tournament as a player, and how did that go? I mean, that's just to be a part of that in Brazil, right? Was it
yeah,
2016?
yeah,
How'd
absolutely.
that go?
So it was quite a a tough selection process with the 14 of the guys that were on the team the previous year that made that tournament roster, and then with a bunch of new guys coming in to training camps. You get invited to training camps, and if if you're not good enough, you won't even come close to the roster. You won't get invited back. But the guys who are close and continue to develop, they'll come back to training camps. So we had about a training camp a month for about a week at a time, from October 2015 all the way through August. Yeah, it's just a battle. You got to earn your roster spot every single training camp. You can't have a minute off, or someone's going to try and rip that jersey, rip that roster spot right from you. So,
Yeah.
fortunately,
So how long were you in? What was the format of Rio? What did that look like? Were you away for some time?
yeah. Well, even the lead up to it, I was fortunate enough. I was actually told in about April that I was going to make the team. After we had about 5 consecutive camps, and then there were still some obviously roster spots were filled, but I was one of the first, probably about 7 to officially make the team and be invited down to Atlanta. And we trained down at a D3 school in Oglethorpe University. So I actually took my spring trimester off of Kalamazoo, went down to Atlanta just on a whim, and my parents were like, "All right, what are you getting yourself into?" Because it had only been a couple of months of me even known about this, and I was like, I'm here to train and try and live this dream out. So we were training just like we are now. We were training about 3 hours a day from April all the way up till September for Rio, or August for Rio. So that,
Wow.
some of the hardest training days I've ever had in my entire life, but it was worth it. Such a
Hmm.
long summer. Thanks.
What was the format of the event then? So you went to Rio. Is that it's obviously same time as Olympic Games, same year? Was it games every day, games every few days? What did that look like?
So it was the top 8 teams in the world, broken down into 2 groups of 4, and then semifinals and finals were the medal rounds. We had a game every other day for the first 3. So I think we had a game on Monday, then we had a game on a Wednesday, then a Friday, and so it was a game every other day. Craziest, most exciting atmosphere I've ever played in my entire life. We had a Friday night game, and we played in front of 14,000 screaming Brazilian fans. So it was the biggest game of my life, and it was crazy. But yeah, we
Wow.
had about 3 games, and yeah.
That is crazy. So, and then how did that finish up? Where did you guys finish up in the 8th?
It's still
Not
a
where
little
you
bit
wanted.
bitter. It's still a little bit bitter because our last game, we were up. We needed to win by 2 to advance to the medal rounds. We had tied our first game and lost our second game to the eventual silver medalists. But to get into the semifinals, to try and get into a semifinal or bronze medal game, we had to win by 2. We're up 2-1 with about 5 minutes left, so we were pushing everyone forward. Everyone forward. We let up a goal on a counterattack with about 3
Wow.
minutes left. So that actually relegated, because of the tiebreakers, it actually relegated us to the 7th, 8th place game. So actually
Oh.
the last place game after being so close to maybe
Hmm.
advancing. And we actually had a goal called back that made it 3-1. They called it back. The goalie didn't really have control, but they said he had control of the ball after we poked it in. So it was really just heart wrenching. But yeah, we
Heartbreaker, huh?
finished off. We
Well,
finished
you
off.
finished there, and then I read was the World Championships 2019.
Yep, yep. We had the World Championships just this past year, and then we also had the Pan American Games, and then we also went to England to St. George's Park and played a couple of games there against them. So it was a pretty busy
Again,
schedule.
a lot of stamps on the passport, then, huh?
Yeah, quite a few. I think I've been to about 10 different countries now. And I think I've only been
Wow.
outside of the country for non-soccer reasons once. So getting my world traveling in.
That's awesome. How did the World Championships and the other events finish up? Good
uh,
experiences as well.
so the World Championships, we we were drawn into the group of death, this quote unquote group of death. It's a top 16 tournament. And we ended up having the 13th best team in the world. We were the 5th. There was the 3rd best team and the 7th best team in our group. So it was a battle. And our very first game was one of the best games we ever played. We beat Iran, who had won the silver medal in Rio. We beat them 3-2, and that was a fun game to play in. We ended up winning our group, and then unfortunately, I suffered a concussion in our last group game against Ireland when we clinched the group. So I was out. We had two other important players on our. One got a yellow card suspension for 2 yellow cards, and then one actually got a red card in the last group game. So we were out 3 of our better players, and we lost to England, we had tied earlier in the summer. We lost 4-2 in the quarterfinals, which was really disappointing because if we had a full team, it would have been a heck of a game, and we really had a chance to go on, maybe finish in the top 3 or so in the world. But
yeah. Well, hey, I hate to hear you lose, but if you're gonna lose to anyone, I'm all right with it being my England team. You know.
It's not a fun game to watch from the set, but
yeah.
We definitely
and through the format of the Paralympic setup, then it's 7-a-side, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? I understand everything is 7s.
Yeah. So it's the best way to put it, I guess, is it's honestly kind of like a U12 field. It's a little bit bigger than that, but and there's no offsides as well. And the goals are just slightly bigger. They're pretty similar, but that's the reference point I use. But there's
so you're playing in with 11v11 goals still?
No, it's just
9v9, something like that.
Yeah, it's about like a 99 goal.
Okay.
It's a little bit bigger than the 12s, but yeah, it's definitely a lot smaller than the 11s.
Where are you playing? Are you playing center back or center forward?
So we actually play a 3-2-1 formation, and I usually play about the left wing back position. So I have quite a few responsibilities for our team. I ended up going up on offense quite a bit, playing almost like a left wing, like I did in college. Left wing in the 4-3-3. But then in the back, I'm defending with our center back marking up their forward most of the time. So it's such a unique game in the sense that I'm marking the last man back, but I'm also out trying to on our counters all the time.
Yeah, it's got to be a lot of running. I know for the wing backs on the call, they know that position is brutal and lots of running. So
yeah.
Well, so talk to me. I mean, last couple of steps here, and then I'll get to some questions the players have put in. Talk to me about you graduated from Kalamazoo, and then came this amazing opportunity at Clemson too. You want to explain what that was and what that looked like?
Yeah.
That seems really cool to me.
It's another situation I was just really fortunate to find myself in. So Clemson, and there's a professor there and a group of students there that put together a scholarship program to try and become the first collegiate cerebral palsy soccer team for Clemson. So I was actually able to go down there, help them develop it. It's still in the beginning stages because it is quite a process to set it all up and whatnot. It's not an easy process by any means, but I was down there involved for that and was able to get a scholarship to go get my master's in economics actually. And really it was such an awesome experience because a couple of guys on our team, or young guys in the youth program now, are really looking forward to becoming, maybe develop the first actual team there in the next couple of years. So me and one of my other
So when you were at Clemson, you were just training then and kind of creating that program?
Yeah, so it wasn't as much about training per se for us. We played with the club team there for our training. We didn't have an official team yet, but we were, giving input to the professor there and basically, helping them out and giving them advice about CP players, about how, the Paralympics, helping to recruit, build a database of the players within our youth national team as well. Kind of being the poster child in a way of a future program.
Wow, so that's got to be cool to at least also maybe put in place a little bit of a pathway for future young players like yourself that maybe will get some opportunities that you didn't get when you were 14, 15, right?
Yeah,
really cool.
It's crazy. And there's also this club team now that's developing all across the nation called CP Soccer US, and they've training sessions and obviously if I was a 14-year-old kid with meeting all these other CP kids that also played soccer pretty competitively, that would have been such a cool experience. But yeah, all these kids now have a pathway to Clemson and getting a college scholarship to train there and then try and develop well enough for the national team to get a call up to our national team. So it's certainly, they're starting the grassroots of a development program for our national team, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, really, really cool. What about so then right now, I know you mentioned you're full time with the team. despite all this pandemic, worst time ever for you, but they've moved you down to Atlanta full time. You want to tell us about that program and what it is you're doing now? And you said you're training every day. Who you with, and what's that program look like? What was it supposed to look like, and what will it look like when we get back to the real world here?
Yeah, again, it's such a cool program. I was the first couple players in the wave. We have about 5 down here now. There were supposed to be more coming in the last couple of months, but unfortunately, COVID changed that. But yeah, it's continuation of continuing to develop and make Paralympic soccer a bigger thing in the U.S. You know, we became professional players, which had never happened before. You know, it was usually, okay, well, the Paralympic national team is great for college kids or high school kids even that are good enough. But, you know, once you're out of school, you got to make money, and you can't really afford to leave your job for a month at a time to go play in a World Cup, you know, because our competitions are pretty long, pretty lengthy when it gets to 16 team competitions and the week-long training camps once every month. It's pretty difficult for a lot of people. So it's really great to obviously extend the careers and have a professional pathway forward for Paralympic soccer. So just honored to be part of it. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So are you guys, is that something that other countries offer as well, or are you guys the first?
Sorry. I think we're about the 4th country now. And the other 3 are the countries that really put a lot into their Paralympic programs. Russia, Ukraine, which do not seem like the normal soccer powerhouses, but they put so much resources into Paralympic sports that they have full-time soccer players, and they're the number 1 and number 2 team in the world. And those guys are elite players, to say the least. Some of the best I've ever played against. And then I think England also has a pathway forward for professionalism. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that how that one works. But I know we're probably the 4th professional country.
Wow, very cool. Well, that's awesome. Hopefully, I hope this all ends soon and we get back to a somewhat normal soccer life, and you can get back to your national team training and keep improving that. So, last piece, Drew, on my list, and then I got a couple of questions of some of the players that submitted that I wanted to pass over to you. What about plans for the future? I mean, taking this pandemic out of the way, where do you see yourself? What do you want to do? What's the goal in soccer? Maybe out of soccer too. What does that look like for you?
You know, right now I'm so happy with where I am. I'm looking. You know, this program's great, and I absolutely love playing professional soccer. It's been awesome. But I also do. I love economics, and I love data analysis and applied economics. Kind of nerdy talk there, but I've been in talks with Atlanta United about maybe getting a front office job. So maybe even working as technical analysis of, you know, putting my economics towards their transfers and whatnot. I've gotten in contact with them, and unfortunately, again, COVID kind of put a stop to that for now. But if I could, you know, transition into one day putting my economics degree to work even after my playing career, but still in soccer, that would be a dream come true, because the sport's meant so much in my life that to continue on even after my playing career and play for as long as I possibly can. But to continue using that degree and afterwards would be fantastic.
That'd be awesome. What's the next big event for you guys then, as far as championships?
So
is the one on the horizon or not?
Yeah. So it was actually supposed to be in May. So we were supposed to be in Sardinia, Italy. It's a little island off Italy, which would have been a sweet location. It was supposed to be in 2 weeks, and then they backed it up in March. They backed it up till mid-October. So right now it's still tentatively set for that. I think it might end up getting pushed back a little further, even probably depending on how all this plays out. Nobody really knows just yet, but it seems a little bit far off to, you know, have the.
What is that event?
Yeah, so it's the top 8 teams in the world.
Okay. So, wow, very cool, man. We'll keep in touch, and hopefully we'll get to see some of that when it eventually does get played. Yeah. So, to get to some player questions, last couple of years, I know we're running out of time a little bit, but what were the big differences between club soccer and college soccer? I know we touched on that a little bit about the physicality, but you remember any of the big differences? Yeah,
I mean, one of the biggest ones, aside from the, you know, obviously the physicality of it, was the teammates. You know, in club soccer, you know, some guys are just, you know, maybe play multiple sports, you know, and great athletes, but maybe not, soccer is not in their future. For college athletes, you know, everyone's there and want to win, you know, from top to bottom. And it's cutthroat, because if you're not performing, you're allowed to sub in a game, and you have a great talented player behind you who wants to go and win. So it's really, you got to step your game and be on at all times, because every single session, every single game is so intense, and you get after a little bit, and you got to be on the top of your game and working your butt off all the time. Otherwise, someone's going to take that spot right away from you.
Yeah, for sure. Second question: what was the most important thing for you growing up that you think might have helped you to be ready when the opportunity came to represent your country and make it at that level? Anything you think that was especially important for you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question the other day because I wasn't quite sure about it, but looking back on it, when I was younger, and I think this is probably how high school soccer helped me the most, because we did have big games in high school soccer, even though it wasn't maybe the highest level of competition. You had games with rivalries and fans that you really had to get up for, and they were big games. And at first, when I struggled with that when I was my first year of varsity soccer. I was starting at left back, which was a new position for me as well, and I wasn't quite. I was always way too anxious for the big games, so I had to learn how to play within a big game and be calm and know that I'm good enough to play in these games and to excel. But I had to get used to big games, because when you're on the national team, they're all big games and you're representing your country. And then we also use the FIFA rules, obviously. So there's no substitutions. If you're not playing well, you got to perform. So it's really about, being out there. And I learned that before the game, I got to remain calm. But getting into the game, the first thing I like to do is, make a long darting run forward and try and make the opponents uncomfortable. I make them uncomfortable, not me. Settle into the game. And that was something I really had to learn and grow into, because
how do you think, I guess, to dive into that deeper, how do you learn that? I know you said like playing in big games, like for your high school. I know a lot of our players, we have, big state cup games, big academy games. Is it just making mistakes and getting it wrong and having bad games that you learn from, or what's the process of learning that?
I certainly have learned from my fair share of bad games, and games where, the players were better than me straight up. But it's so much of, you just got to take a step back. If you can look back and consider the game, so the next one, what you did wrong, and that you were there to play. And a lot of times when I was younger and, again, anxious, I looked back on the game. I was like, wait a minute, I did not play well, and I could have played so much better. What did I do wrong? What could I have done better to make myself more comfortable? It's a lot of experience. You got to be in a couple of them. You got to get used to it. But you got to know that you're there for a reason in that game, and that you're good enough to play, and just become comfortable and really, make a movement, make a darting run, make the opponents uncomfortable was the thing I learned. If putting them on their heels, making a hard tackle maybe, and letting them run, you're there to play, because then they get wound up and a little frustrated and uncomfortable. So
I think it's probably like winning that psychological battle of that and getting in people's faces. And I think another cool thing you just touched on was that self-reflection and self-evaluation afterwards, and looking back as well as looking forward, to just say what went right, what went wrong, why did I do this, why was I second best today, and learning from that, I think, is a really cool message. Thank you. Last few questions here, Drew. Who is or was your biggest influence as a player?
As in my favorite player, maybe growing up, or
any kind of influence, anyone that you think had an effect on you.
Again, when I was growing up, I guess for the player, there are a lot of great other people. I'll touch on that, but first of all, the player was Arjen Robben. He was the coolest player I thought to watch, because he was a left-footed player just like me, and then I learned so much from him, his dynamic movements. And he, when you're growing up, you're kind of taught, left mid's a left mid. You're going up and down but I would watch him cut in, cut out, and with the quick movements he had, and playing a 1-2 and getting the ball back for a shot. I learned a lot of his dynamic movements and would study those and just watch him play. And then, I touched on it earlier too. My coaches, I'm so fortunate to have so many great coaches that really helped me along. Lumumba Shabazz was huge, even helping me get into the national team, being prepared for that, being allowed to play at Kalamazoo, being able to play and become a good player there. And then my crew junior coach, I would not change that situation for the world. Again, we weren't the most elite team, but he was such a good coach, and really he taught the game the way that really spoke to me and allowed me to be the best player I could possibly be. And then
very cool.
And then again, it's a little cliche too, but my parents, the way they helped me with my disability, they didn't really allow me to think I had a disability in a way, which sounds, a little weird, but they were like, well, you're going to play sports just like your siblings. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And I wanted to, and they treated me no differently, and that was a huge thing that allowed me to notice that, but just move on and accept it and try and become the best soccer player I could be.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Was that always the case as a kid then? You said your parents just like said, just don't want to use the word like ignore it, but just, was it a kind of a get on with it and go do it and have fun, or what did that look like? Did you doubt yourself at that point? Or
no, they did. They handled it about as well as they possibly could. I wouldn't have to do things I couldn't do. I really, for my disability, just a small example, I couldn't use a can opener. So they weren't going to ever ask me to use a can opener. But if I told them I couldn't go play basketball because I could only dribble with one hand, or, I couldn't make my bed or something like that, that was just unacceptable. I was out there playing basketball, doing all the things any other normal kid would do, just a little differently. So they would never make me do something I couldn't physically do, but they'd also give me they would not buy any of my excuses I would try and give them, which was fantastic.
I guess where does that line come though, Drew? Because I imagine it would have been, and I imagine there's a lot of people with CP who can't play soccer, right? Who either they didn't get after it, they just thought, I can't do this. I mean, if I don't have the strength on that right side, like I ain't gonna go and play, especially not club soccer or varsity high school soccer, right? Like, I mean, where does that line come? Was that just you not believing that you couldn't do something, or was it just a love for it, or was it luck? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it'd probably be a little bit of both. Obviously, if I couldn't really do anything, but and if they really did see that I was struggling with it, at some point, I can't do certain things, and it was kind of a case by case situation of what that is. Right. It's kind of hard to define, I guess, but they really pushed me as far as I could be pushed, which was great. But they're also understanding as well.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, that's great. And like I say, I'm sure it's made you the player and the person you are today, and fighting and keeping improving as you are is fantastic opportunity for you. So I love the Iron Robin thing too, because when you told me that story about you always go on your left foot, I think of Iron Robin, who everybody knows in the professional game that he's going to his left foot. Yeah, he somehow still manages to cut inside and score every time. It's amazing. Well, in fact, I saw the ever consistent Tom Kelly asked some question. Was there ever a coach that butted heads with you, but now you realize that they helped you a lot? Good question.
There was.
Yeah.
It was actually my high school coach my sophomore year. We had a pretty good team when I was a sophomore. We ended up going to, I think it was, especially for Eastern Rapids, because we're not a soccer powerhouse by any means, but I think we went to the state quarterfinals. And here I was, a kid that I usually played left mid or left forward when I was in club soccer in my entire life, basically. And we're going to stick you at left back because we have an opening there, and you're good enough to play, but you're not better than our forwards we have that are seniors or pretty talented upperclassmen. So we're going to play you at left back and see how it goes. And I was throughout the summer workouts and everything. I was like, what? I don't think so. I think I'm better than the left mid player, which maybe I wasn't at the time. I thought I had the confidence, but I wasn't. But I ended up playing left back. I played it pretty well to come nowadays and realize that I'm left back for the Paralympic team, and it's my position. I wouldn't think of it any other way. So it's crazy how it all worked out. Just being that needed there.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens, isn't it? Good question, Tarrant. Last question for me, Drew. Best player you've played with or against, and why?
With, I'm not sure if you remember the name. This was again a high school moment that really opened me up, and I was like, I need to get better at soccer. He may never be the absolute best player I've played against, but relatively at that moment was TJ Van Sluten. He played for Northview and then went on to play for Michigan. And it was my first year playing defense, and it was about the fifth game of my sophomore year. And my assignment was to man mark him. So here I was, a 14-year-old kid about to man mark, all-American high school player that was going on to play at Michigan. And I learned so much just from in that game and remembering after the game. That was crazy. Just his movements and understanding the game and I wanted to, learn from him and remember that game and take as much as I possibly could. He schooled me a couple times for sure, but yeah, it was certainly an experience. And
You
then
just you get amongst them and try to put them on the floor pretty quick, or what?
Yeah, I tried to. The 6'2", 145 body frame at that time wasn't quite helping me, but yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, hey, Drew, I know we're running out of time a little bit here, but to kind of cap it off here, thank you so much for spending the time, and it's been a pleasure for me. I know I'm sure some of the players and families will take different things from this story and this chat. I think your journey to where you are today as a professional player is fantastic, and hope that you keep in touch. And like I say, please, I'm sure we'll keep in touch from here too. But I'd love to keep that communication going so we can keep in touch when you do get back on the field and on those competition circuits again that we can watch and follow along a little bit. And I hope keep in touch as well for the future in the club.
Sounds good. Definitely enjoyed the conversation. Really, I love helping out players, younger players, as much as I possibly can if they can take even one tidbit away. I love that. So thank you for having me on.
And that's what this is all about, Drew, for our players. If we can pick, we challenge them to pick one thing from the story and something they can apply to their game. And I think with you on and off the field, there's so many lessons that our players can put into place as well, right? And that's what it's all about. So really appreciate you giving us the time. Keep working hard, man, and hopefully we'll get back to the field soon. And hopefully, as I say, we'll keep in touch when you get back to GR next time, all right?
Sounds good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks, Drew. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.